Thanks. Don, are you going to speak tonight, or?
If you like, I'd be happy to. I'd love to have the opportunity to say hi, if I can.
Okay, sure.
If I
In a
can,
public portion, you can.
Okay, thank you. Is there an agenda, or I just pay attention?
Yeah,
I apologize for that. Good evening. Due to COVID public health emergency, our meeting is being held via audio conference as well. I'm Gail Teresi, Consul Pro Temp, sitting in for Council President Diane Snyder, who's unable to be with us this evening. I hereby call to order the May 24th, 2021 council meeting from the City of Mayfield Heights. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Belstria.
Present.
Mr. DeJohn.
Here.
Mrs. Finney. Here. Mr. Mano.
Here.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Here.
Mrs. Snyder. Mrs. Teresi.
Here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Donna, can you hear us now?
I can hear you guys perfectly. Thank
Okay,
you.
good. We couldn't hear her.
It's pouring me down.
We will now move to the acceptance of minutes from our council meeting of May 10th, 2021. I hope everyone's had a chance to read the minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Move, Finney.
Moved by Mr. Mano, seconded by Mrs. Finney. Are there any suggested changes, amendments, or deletions to the minutes? I have one change. I don't know if Ms. Lloyd has made that change or not, but it was in, I think it was page 6. Did you get my change this afternoon or this morning?
Yes, I made the change.
Okay, thanks so much. I appreciate it. Are there any other changes to the minutes? All in favor of approval of the minutes signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The minutes of the council meeting of May 10th, 2021 have been approved as written. Next, we'll move on to the agenda. We'll go to correspondence and announcements. Does any member of council have any correspondence or announcements? Mr. DeJohn.
Thank you, Madam President. I received a very disturbing call last week from a council representative from another city. And I'll summarize what she said basically is she did not think Mayfield Heights was going in the right direction. She said it's making other cities around us look bad. And she says as a council, she didn't feel that we were doing our job as council representatives. So it was definitely a wake-up call to me. I listened to her. She said she had called several other council people who received the same call, and I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeJohn. Mr. Mano.
I also got that call and was on the phone with her for almost 40 minutes. Not a very happy camper. She said, in effect, she said, it's very difficult to sit and watch the city of Mayfield Heights deteriorate. That was her words. So I don't know how many other people got the calls, but she said she was going to call everybody. So I don't know. But that was my conversation with her.
Thank you, Mr. Mano. Mayor, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just wondering if she was specific on deteriorating, in what way?
She just said her words were, "It's hard to sit by and watch the city of Mayfield Heights deteriorate." That's what she said.
For 40 minutes, she didn't give you any examples,
Well,
huh?
she touched on a lot of things, the condition of the housing, the condition of the roads, the condition of commercial properties. She went on and on and on and on, 40 minutes worth. And I just listened. I had very little else to say to her.
Speak into your microphone.
Council is not doing their job because they're letting all this happen.
Mr. DeJohn.
Mayor, she said she talked to you before she talked to me, so, and she said you listened.
She mentions, she calls everyone, if I could, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, she's called me ever since I became mayor. And some of the examples, I would say, they were more in line with what she thinks, how we would run this city if we were in her city, which is a very affluent city. So I didn't think some of her, comparisons or some of her suggestions would work very well here in Mayfield Heights. But, I mean, I think if we're going to put on record, especially at a council meeting, that someone has called you and has said that Mayfield Heights is, deteriorating and, is making her city look bad, I think we need to get that on the record exactly what she's saying, because I think people need to know what she's saying.
So,
Mr. DeJohn.
so this was an actual council representative from another city, so just to make it clear, so. And that was her perception, obviously, perception's perception, but, I mean, one thing she did say to me is she goes, this council has a lot more power than it really knows it has. And I took that to heart. So we'll start exercising, I think, as a whole, as a council, start exercising those powers. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move on to reports of officers. We'll begin with Mayor DeSico. Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Road work will begin this week. We have a lot of stuff going on this summer. Wharton Boulevard is set to start Phase 1 on May 27th. Dominion will start lowering the natural gas lines. And the work on Wharton is going to take a while, but the Phase 1 should be done by July 1st. And then once that work is done, for Breezy Trucking, we'll begin the road reconstruction project, which should last till October. And the city engineer and the contractor will schedule an in-person meeting with the residents during June before the start of that reconstruction. Ashcroft neighborhood pavement improvements, Agresta will begin work on June 1st and is expected to be completed in 90 days. The contractor will deliver project notifications to all residents soon. And then lastly, Gates Mills Boulevard resurfacing will begin on June 1st by Roniak Paving, and it is expected to be completed in 45 days. So notifications about that project will be delivered to all residents. As far as the pool community center project, we received 15 total proposals for the architecture firms. It was a great response, a lot of great firms, and we have narrowed it down to 5, which we're going to do a pre-interview meeting this Wednesday with them. And then we will have interviews with them again next week, and we will choose one of those firms to head this very important project to the city. So we're looking forward to that. The building department began exterior home maintenance inspections, or will begin next month, and inspectors will concentrate on the northwest side of the city, beginning at Iroquois and moving east to Lander, between Mayfield and Ridgebury. The police department hired a new officer today, and I had the honor of swearing in Officer Todd Hanley. Todd comes to our city with 10 years of experience And on behalf of City Council and the administration, we want to welcome Officer Hanley to our city and wish him the best of luck. And I'm happy to see Mr. Johnson here from Kimball, because I know we had some questions from council at the last meeting, so we'll be here to answer your questions. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mayor. Does anyone have any questions for the mayor? Mr. DeJean?
Thank you, Madam President. Well, you all know, Mayor and Council, I sent a letter to Mr. Bittner inquiring about the hiring of a new officer. And he did respond back to me, and for the residents at home, what I questioned him about is why we were taking a full-time officer and placing him at Lander Road School and eliminating the retired officer there, which will now cost us more money because the full-time officer, as we all know, has benefits, and he'll be at the school instead of on the streets. And I basically asked Chief Bittner why council wasn't informed of this, and he basically said to me that it was in the budget, the hiring of a new officer. So financially, it doesn't make sense to me. I did talk with Mrs. Fagan about it being in the budget. Yeah, it's buried in the budget. She said she will start calling all of that to our attention from now on. Thank you.
Mrs. Fagan,
Yes, please, thank you. If I could just throw out one other point on that. Although this will be a full-time officer with benefits, we also looked at the comparison because this officer will now be available to help cover some of those summer vacations when overtime in the department will be heavy. The officer will not be in the school at that time, but will be back here in the department or on the road. So that will help defray overtime costs during the summer months also.
Yeah, just.
Sorry, you didn't believe what I
just-
was saying?
No, I believe exactly what you were saying. It's just that we increased our costs. Now, the way I understand it is the Mayfield school system pays half the cost for that officer there. We pay the other costs. So if the retired officer was making $10 an hour without any benefits, it's hardly costing us anything. I understand the overtime situation, too. Thank you.
Mrs.
Madam
Fa-
Chair, if I
Mayor?
the chief and I had this conversation, and in the discussion, he felt that having a full-time man being there at the school and then being able to use him the rest of the year and being able to put him on the road when school is not in session was the most prudent thing to do, because we could not use the prior officer there and put him on the road in the summer. It wasn't feasible, because he hadn't been on the road in many, many years. So that decision was made between myself and the chief after discussion. It was a hard discussion because the officer we replaced, I was very happy with. I mean, he's a great guy. He did a lot for the city. But as far as the police department and the way the chief wants to run the department, I respect his opinion and the direction he wanted to go. So that's why that decision was made.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Mano?
I have one question. If what you say is the concern about having the availability of the full-time officer in the summer months, why not just leave him on the road full-time, which is what he's supposed to be doing anyway, and keep the part-time guy at the school so that, you know, he works when the school's in session, and when it's not, he's not working? I mean, it doesn't make sense what you're saying to me.
If I can answer.
You got a full-time officer, leave him on the road working full-time. Why take him off the road, put him in the school, and then put him back on the road again? That just doesn't seem to make much sense.
Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. Because it is the cover for, as Mrs. Fagan said, during the summer, they don't need another full-time guy because you're replacing the part-time guy with a full-time guy, and then there will be another hire for that person who is the full-time person who's going to the school. So we are, the full-time SRO, School Resource Officer, will be used in the summer to supplement the guys who are going on vacation or sick calls or things like that. So we have it's just having an ace in the hole that they can use during the summer and eliminate overtime and eliminate some of the problems that they have in the summer with scheduling of vacations and things like that.
And Mayor, may I just ask, the gentleman that you, the officer you just swore in, is he going to be the hire?
He's our new hire.
Right,
yes.
he's our new
Full-time,
hire, and
yes.
that's the only.
Patrolman.
That's the only patrolman we're hiring this year.
No, he is to replace a retiree. And then we're hiring another individual to hire. We have 2 retirees this year, Orcutt and Nieberline. So
then-
we're replacing those 2.
Got it.
Man,
Mr. DeJohn,
I understand what you're saying about the overtime, but I rather see a part-timer as an SRO at the school system, and if you want to hire another officer to put them on the street, to put 10 on the street instead of 9, that's what I rather see. And that's what my vote would have been. And also, the school system, I heard it from the employees, administration, and the kids are all devastated that they're losing this officer that was there. Thank you, that's all.
thank you.
Enough said.
Let's move on to Director of Law, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no report this evening.
Thank you. We'll move on to our Director of Finance, Mrs. Fagan.
Thank you. I have no report this evening either.
Okay. Next, we'll move on to our reports of committees, commissions, and boards, and we will begin with the Building Committee, which I chair. And we have not had a meeting as of yet, but I will be scheduling a building meeting in the next couple weeks, and I'll confer with Mrs. Sabetta, who's my co-chair for that availability. So now we will move on to Finance and Audit. Mr. Balistrea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, the Finance and Audit Committee has a meeting scheduled for Friday, June the 11th. It was scheduled for 8 a.m. And as always, council is welcome. And that's my report.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Balistrea? We'll next move on to our Legislative Committee, Mrs. Finney.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have no report.
Thank
And I'm
you.
Finney.
has left the conference.
Who's that? Oh. Next, we'll move on to Public Works and Services Committee, Mr. DeJohn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't have a report tonight, but has the meeting been scheduled with the Wooddock residents? Yes. And what's the date of that meeting, so we can? June 2nd.
Second?
At what time and where?
Is that the community center? I thought you guys received emails.
Nope.
No, not yet. Six o'clock. 6 o'clock at the community center.
On June 2nd, Community Center. And these are the Woodhawk residents?
Correct.
Okay, at 6 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to our Recreation and Parks Committee, Mr. Mano.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Draga Pool will open on Tuesday, June 1st. Early bird rates for season passes are being sold at City Hall until Friday at 4:30. Regular season passes rates will be sold at the pool beginning on June 1st. Seniors, join us on Wednesday, June 16th from 11 to 1 for a luncheon concert featuring the Silver Creek Duo. The cost includes a light lunch, beverage, and sweet treat. The cost is $5. Pre-registration is required. Unity Days will be back this year. Planning is underway for our annual festival, which will be held on June 25th through June 27th Watch Facebook and the website for updates. For more information, call the Recreation Department at 442-2627. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mano. I have one quick question for you. Is there going to be a parade this year as well as the Unity Days?
Is now in the conference.
We're having a Park and Rec meeting tomorrow evening over at the park, and I'm sure at that point we'll discuss whether or not there's going to be a parade.
Thank you. We'll next move on to Safety and Transportation Committee. I'm sorry, Mr. DeJohn.
Mr. Mano, wasn't Mrs. Stoffen on Parks and Rec at one time?
She was on Commission on Aging.
Oh, okay, sorry. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to move on to Safety and Transportation Committee, Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. I have no report.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to Board of Zoning Appeals, Mrs. Sabetta.
Again, thank you. The Board of Zoning Appeals met on May 11th. As a result, 2 resolutions are on the agenda. We can address them when they come forth. Council has been copied on the meeting minutes. I encourage all applicants to address council during the public portion of this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move on to Planning Commission, Mr. Balistrea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Planning Commission did meet last Monday, May 17th. As a result of that meeting, we have 2 motions on the agenda this evening, and I'll entertain any questions at that time.
Thank you very much. We will now move on to the public portion. Due to COVID-19 crisis, the state of Ohio has established guidelines for public gatherings in an effort to keep residents, all members of the public, council representatives, and other city employees safe during this time. The city of Mayfield Heights has closed the city council meetings to public attendance. Because public participation and transparency are important values of the city, residents are invited to view the meeting via live streaming and broadcast. Additionally, questions and/or comments may be submitted to the council office by noon on Monday, May 24th, 2021, by emailing Karen Fagan at karenfagan@mayfieldheights.org. Mrs. Fagan,
I have no requests to
I
have
don't
anything read
believe it.
tonight.
we're so accustomed to you reading 13 letters.
We love
that
hearing from the residents, but I'm glad to say I don't have
I
to
have
read
nothing
tonight.
today.
Yes.
Okay. So if you are sitting in our audience and you are here in connection with an agenda item, this is your opportunity to address council. It is now 7:23, and I will open the public portion. Mr. Johnson? Please state your name and address, and please speak into the microphone. Press the button so it's green.
Good evening, Don Johnson. I work with Kimball Recycling and Disposal. Our corporate office is in Dover, Ohio. I'm the Northern Ohio Municipal Manager for Kimball, and I work out of the Twinsburg office covering the northern part of Ohio. And in 2016, I'll call us Kimball instead of Kimball Recycling and Disposal, if you don't mind, but we were very excited to enter into a contract with you in 2016. We've got to know a lot of the people in your service department, and we enjoy our relationship with them. And we appreciate the opportunity. We entered into a new agreement with you effective January 1st of this year, and we thank you for that. We as an industry, the waste hauling and recycling industry and trucking industry across our country are faced with a commercial drivers shortage. CDLs, we call it, commercial drivers licensed individuals. The shortage has been growing for a period of time. It's something that we're not pleased with. It's something that we've worked very hard because we've noticed it for a few months now, and we have individuals in our human resources department that just focus. They focus and scour all over to try to find individuals that want to become CDL drivers. We get a fair amount of respondents to our request. But the problem that we're finding recently is that we'll call them up. Last week, we had 2 days where we had 7 assigned for each day to come in and interview on a Tuesday and a Thursday, and none of them showed up. They found that maybe they just wanted to not seek employment for some reason. And we've noticed that trend over the last few months. We have been able to hire 5 individuals that are on our training force, training class rather, and the class is a 7-week period that it takes because they're in a large vehicle. You've seen our vehicles and our competitors' vehicles, and it takes some experience and training to have them operate safely and to understand how to provide the services that we want them to provide to have the best service possible to your community. And recently, we've had individuals that maybe they think it's greener on the other side of the fence that have left employment. Others have left employment to work somewhere else, and others have left employment because for some reason they don't feel that they have a need to work right now, and that's unfortunate because we offer a very, very competitive wage, benefits, and 401k program, but Kimball's not alone in that area. Our competitors throughout Ohio and the United States are also faced with this shortage, and we hope that it goes away sooner than later. But we work very hard to to continue to provide quality service to your residents. We do have certain days where we don't have enough drivers to sit in the seat to drive, and when that does occur, we have drivers from other communities that we ask to come over to assist to start the service for the day, and sometimes that could be mid-morning. We have supervisors that come and assist as well, and there have been a few days where we've let trash sit and we have to come in the next morning to finish either the recycling or the rubbish routes. We don't like having to do this, but it's a situation that we're faced with today. We are very, very focused to find individuals to come in and interview with the right individuals, hire them, put them through training, and get them on the fast track to put them into our driver pool to provide service throughout all of our municipal work in Greater Cleveland and throughout Ohio. Kimball is a family company out of Dover, Ohio, and we've been in the solid waste business since the 1950s with the landfill in Dover, Ohio. It's an EPA-approved landfill, and we moved to Twinsburg in 2007, which I had the good fortune of help open for the Kimball family and operate, and we've had some nice growth, and your community is one of those. But we did release a press release that I gave you all to view, and we've been in contact with your service department, Chuck, the supervisor in the service department, and I believe he said he was going to put it on your website, or it has been. And we thank you for your patience, and I want you to let you know that we work daily. We work daily to continue to provide the service that you would come to expect. And again, we are really, really working hard to get people into the door to interview and hire the right people. And hopefully this shortage will go by the wayside here sooner than later. But any questions that you may have of me, I'd be happy to address the question. And if I don't have an answer, I'll find the answer and get back to you.
Mr. Mano?
Mrs. Johnson, I can understand your plight with getting help. Everybody seems to be in the same boat. But there are a couple of things. They've missed our pickup twice now in the last 3 weeks. They come back the next day to pick it up. Last week, the truck that came down the street wasn't a Kimball truck. It was some other waste hauling company. I understand that there was a small sign on the bottom part of the body of the truck that said Kimball. I don't know how many more times we're going to experience this missing. When we do have the missing, the phone rings, and people want to know why. One other thing that was kind of disconcerting is 2 weeks ago, a resident on Iroquois called me, very upset. They missed her pickup, her garbage pickup, and they just missed it. They did most of the rest of the street, but they didn't get hers. And she called the service department, and they told her to call Kimball. And she called Kimball. She got a female person on the phone, and she said, "What am I supposed to do with all this garbage?" And the woman said to her, "Well, I guess you're just going to have to put it in your yard and put it out again next week, won't you?" That call, believe me when I tell you, when that woman called me, she was so irate, I thought she was coming through the phone.
Well, Mr. Mano, I'm sorry that it's taken this long for us to find out about that. One of the things that we do, we train our customer services representatives, and we do record each of the conversations, and if we would have known about this sooner, or if you have an approximate date or time of that, sometimes we only keep the records for a week or so. I don't know how long ago was it,
About
sir?
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, so if you happen to have a phone number for that individual that called, and you can email it to me, I'll give you one of my cards.
Okay?
We'll go back and try to retrieve from the phone number of if the lady will allow you to give us her phone number, we can go back into our archives and try to find that and play it back. And trust me, we do not condone that type of response from our customer service individuals. And we also have a shortage of not just Kimball. Again, it sounds like Kimball's the only one that's having an issue with workers and what have you, but throughout the country, there's a shortage of parts at times for vehicles, for trucks, our trucks. And at times we used to go to a dealer and get the part and fix the truck, or we'd have it on our shelves in our shops, mechanical shops. And what's happening, we're seeing a shortage of equipment to replace equipment that wears out a little bit. So what we have to do in those situations is we have to rent trucks for a day, and I'm fairly confident that and I don't want to advertise for the rental company in Cleveland. They're a great company and they treat us good, but that's probably the name that was on the side that you saw. And then we put a Department of Transportation, we have to put our Kimball sign, which is rightfully so, on the side of the truck, and it is a little bit smaller, or quite a bit smaller. So that's the reason that you saw that truck, sir.
Thank you.
But
Mr. DeJean.
Yes, I had discussed this with the mayor at the last meeting about our residents calling Kimball instead of our service department. That's what they're being told. No. So I called Kimball and asked them, and they said that is your policy. You rather have the resident call you rather than our service department. Now, I don't really agree with that because I don't think that's the resident's place. They should call us, and then we should be the liaison between you and the resident. But can you elaborate a little bit more on why that policy is that way? You want the resident to call directly to your company rather than our service department?
yeah, and again, it varies between municipality, and when we started each municipal contract that we start new as a company, we correspond and say residents have the option to call Kimball at the 800 number to our customer service, because you are in a minority of municipalities. Many of them just, they don't want to handle the calls. But so it works both. Some communities like it that way, some not. So when we start service in municipalities, we do include our customer service number for the residents to call us if they'd like. But at times the cities will want the residents, like in your community, to call them first. But if they do call us, we're going to respond to that residence and not tell them, well, don't call us, call the city. I mean, they're trained to try to answer the question that the resident brings up, or if they don't have an answer, to reach out to a general manager and get the right answer for that caller. But the communication that we have with your service department is if something, a stop has not been picked up, and it's either a misstop or perceived misstop. It works both ways. We have a direct communication for your service department individuals to email us at, we call it twinops@kimballcompanies.com, and what they do is it goes to a series of 8 individuals at our Twinsburg operation. So if a supervisor is out helping on a route, or a supervisor is interviewing someone for a job position or training, it falls in line to another individual. So it allows for that call not to be lost for a couple hours. That could make the difference between getting out there and providing the service that might have been missed or was a late set out. And if we got enough people, at times we do go back out and pick those up as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anyone have anything else for Mr. Johnson? I just have one comment, Mr. Johnson, and that is that I, at the last council meeting, I did read an email from a resident on Cedar Road, and probably over the last 6 months, he's written me quite a few times saying that they forget to pick up the garbage. I believe his garbage day is on Tuesday. I might be wrong, but they don't seem to go on his specific day. They go maybe the next day, or he has to call in. And I did read I read it verbatim at the last council meeting, and he finally said that he called Kimball and was told that they were having driver problems. So I would like you to pay some attention to Cedar Road, because it's more than just this time.
And it's more than one individual?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
Cedar
more
Road.
than one
Okay.
individual. It's more than one occurrence that it was not picked up. And I also have one other email here from a resident on Woodhawk who said that most residents put their trash out on Monday night for Tuesday pickup. And they picked up the trash on Tuesday, as they're supposed to, but they left the recycle. So they came back on Wednesday to pick that up, which meant that all the totes were out front for 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And he said, why isn't the trash company emptying both containers on the same day? Let's keep Mayfield Heights beautiful. So we'd like to do that, if that's something you can.
We're
Work
working
on.
hard at it, and we'll continue to.
Thank you.
And thanks for highlighting those areas. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Okay, no other comments or questions? Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
And
Thank you for coming.
Thank you all for hearing me through. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to be heard this evening? Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Council, Mayor. Jonathan Burns, 3733 Park East Drive, Beechwood, Ohio.
Good evening, William Payne, 10750 Mayfield Road, Chardon, Ohio, of Payne & Payne Builders.
We're going to be here this evening on your agenda is the approval for a medical building on Cedar Road. I just want to comment that we've worked with the various different subcommittees, planning, zoning, BZA, and it's been a very collaborative process and actually pleasant. And I'm very, very grateful. We've worked in many cities, and it's been professional, congenial, and really kind of pro-business. And we look forward to hopefully your positive approval and creating a new business and new building for Mayfield Heights. I can't help but sit here during the other comments earlier today. As an institutional real estate consultant, which ORG has another arm that we do, I tour many cities throughout the country and really throughout the world. And I've watched Mayfield. I've lived in Cleveland my whole life. I was just coming to a friend in 1977 during the storm. I spent it with friends walking up and down Mayfield Road going to McDonald's, which was open during the storm. I think the pivot and maintenance and continuous, and I also own a commercial office building, Landerbrook, in Mayfield Heights. I think that the city has worked beautifully, especially through these tough times. Pivot in retail and redevelopment of certain properties has been outstanding. I know there's always critics. It's hard to sit up here and listen to all these different comments. But I can tell you objectively, I think the city has worked very hard to maintain its infrastructure, its commercial districts, and the housing districts. I drive through them on my way here often. So it's been tough times, but I think it's been a job well done, and I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
And similar to what Mr. Burns said, I also wanted to express my thanks for everybody that we've worked with over the past few months. I know it has been a collaborative process, and we've enjoyed working with you. As a fellow resident on Genesee, I'm also excited to see Mayfield Heights move with their Mayfield corridor projects, and I'm excited to see where things turn in the next few years. So thank you very much for your time, and appreciate all your working with us.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else this evening that would like to be heard? Okay, it is 7:41, and we will close the public portion. We will now move on to resolutions, and we'll begin with Resolution 2021-39, Mr. Murphy. Forgot your name.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution 2021-39, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with Tyler Technologies to provide an enterprise resource planning system for the Finance Department and Human Resources Division and declaring an emergency. Second reading.
Is there a motion to place on second reading? I
Moved.
apologize.
Third.
Mr. Mano?
Moved.
Second.
I'm sorry, speak into your microphone. Who seconded?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Balestria. Roll call on the motion to place on second reading.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. Belstria,
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Do we have any discussion this evening?
I was just wondering, why are we putting these on readings again?
Because we're going to be having a finance meeting, which Mr. Balestria mentioned is going to be June 11th at 8 a.m., to discuss the software package with Mrs. Fagan.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else? Roll call on the motion to, wait, we don't have to do that, do we? I'm sorry. Roll call on the motion to approve? No, we're done. I can just, I'm sorry.
Second reading.
That's it,
It's
we're done.
moved, seconded. Now roll call on the motion
Okay.
to place on second
Second
reading.
reading. Resolution 2021-42, Mr. Murphy, sorry about that. Mr. Murphy?
Need a motion, or you had a motion on the floor to place on second reading. Now you need a roll call on that.
Oh, we did a roll call.
Did you do it?
Yeah.
Oh,
No.
okay.
That's why I was, yeah, we did a roll call, we did discussion, and that Resolution 2021-39 is on second reading.
Okay.
Now.
Resolution
we'll go to 42.
2021-42, a resolution confirming the action of the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Mayfield Heights in granting to Joseph and Lisa Fior Curcillo, 1694 Gilbert Drive, a variance to construct a new storage shed on the property. Cuyahoga County, permanent parcel number 861-22-093, larger in area than that allowed by the codified ordinances. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move.
Move, Finney.
Moved by Mr. Balestria, seconded by Mrs. Finney. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mr. Belstria,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi,
Yes. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move, Finney.
Moved by Mrs. Finney,
Second?
second by Mrs. Sabetta. The resolution confirms BZA's approval to grant Mr. and Mrs. Curcillo a variance to construct a new storage shed that will be larger than the allowed by city ordinance. Mrs. Sabetta, do you have anything to add?
I'm asking, is the applicant present? Is it okay if he speaks?
Sure.
Good evening, everyone. I wish I came before you to have the opportunity to build a bigger home or a bigger garage, but unfortunately, I can't get my employer to approve a raise for the cost of materials. The cheapest environment I could come up with was a storage shed. Unfortunately, a 10 by 12 storage shed I barely fit into myself, along with my 2 children, my wife, and all of her junk. So we were looking for another option. Fortunately, there is a company out in Chardon that does provide storage sheds pre-built. In order to move the clutter in my yard equipment into the shed, I do require a 10 by 16 shed. I came forth to the Building Zoning Board with a plan. They've spoken to my neighbors, I believe, in the back. It was going to put up some type of fencing. Unfortunately, we're going to share it now. The cost of that, she's going to own the fence. So I'm trying to basically build a larger storage shed to increase storage space in the garage. We have rooted our family here in Mayfield. I grew up in Highland Heights. My wife in Mayfield her whole life on the same street, along with all of my in-laws now. So we're there for the long haul, and I just need more room for that. That's the reason I come before you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Any other discussion? Mrs. Sabata, do you have something else?
Yes, thank you. Council has heard from the applicant. There is ample room on the lot, leaving green space. He has a pool, 2-car garage, a deck. The rear property line, the vinyl 6-foot fence will be installed by the rear property owner. It was a unanimous recommendation to approve. All members were present. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move, anything else? Roll call on the, Mr. Bellistrea.
Yeah, I just think it's time, and I think I mentioned it one time before, we've seen a number of residents come in asking for variances on shed sizes. You know, a lot of our homes have 1-car garages, and, you know, we're very restrictive, I think, on the size of sheds that we allow on properties for what people need to store nowadays, especially with lawn furniture and kids' toys and things like that. I'm going to ask Mr. Murphy to draw up some legislation. I'll head that up, and I think it's time that we look at some new legislation with regards to shed sizes per acreage of property, but I'd like to encompass the rear property as the total acreage, not the total property acreage. It doesn't make sense to me if you take a property on, let's say, Ridgeberry Boulevard, who's got a tremendous frontage, and that resident can build a larger shed because he has a half an acre of property. But somebody on Lander Road who has 150 feet behind his home can't build the same size shed. I think there's a disparity in our ordinance, and I'd like to correct that. So I'd like to head that up, and Madam Chair, if we could send that to probably legislative committee. I'll meet with Mr. Murphy and work up some legislation with that idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bellistrea. Possibly we should look at some of the ordinances, since we have so many residents going to BZA for variances. I mean, they get denied in building, they go to BZA, and they get approved. Maybe we should look at some of the ordinances and see if they need to be updated and changed.
This would be
that
one-
might be smarter than just changing legislation for just this purpose, but let's look at overall what we're sending to BZA for practical difficulty purposes. So maybe we can have, Mrs. Finney, can you set up a legislative meeting with Mr. Murphy? And
Of course I can, and I was thinking also, maybe we want to ask BZA if they have any suggestions of anything they think should be changed.
we can do that as well. Yes, but if you would be kind enough to work with your committee and set up a meeting to review some of these ordinances, I think that would help in many of the situations.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mano?
I agree with what you're saying as far as, going over those ordinances and this thing don't work anyway. Going over
Speak
the
into it.
ordinances, I'm speaking into it. Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear
I
you.
gotta be on top of it to make it work. Anyway, but just bear in mind one thing, though. When you're creating the new ordinance, there's a lot more properties with 140-foot deep lots that are not the lots like on Ridgeberry and Lander and places like that. So you really need to take that into account, because you got a lot of 150-foot deep by 45 feet wide or 50 feet wide. They're smaller lots, and whatever we do to change this, you got to take that into account for the sizing of sheds and stuff to put on those properties.
We will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Teresi,
Yes, Mrs. Finney?
maybe everybody on council should think about if there's anything else as well as BZA if that wants to come before legislation and look at being changed or updated, whichever way.
Okay. We'll take that into consideration. Thanks, Mrs. Finney. We'll work with Mr. Murphy. So roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mr. Belstria,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes. Resolution 2021-42 has been adopted. We'll move to Resolution 2021-43. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution 2021-43, a resolution confirming the action of the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Mayfield Heights in granting to Dave Brink, Allen Industries, on behalf of Guitar Center and H.H. Golden Gate LLC, a variance to allow a 7.2 square foot sign on the west side of the plaza building at 1547 Golden Gate Plaza, Cuyahoga County Permanent Parcel Number 862-30-001. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Mano,
Second.
second by Mr. Balestria. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Belstria,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes. Mr. Murphy.
Just to clarify, I misspoke. It is not a 17.2 square foot sign. It is a 175.2 square foot sign on the side of the building.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move, Finney.
Moved by Mrs. Finney.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Sabetta. Again, Mr. Murphy just said that it is a 175.2 square foot sign on the west side of the plaza at Golden Gate Plaza. Mrs. Sabetta, do you have anything to discuss from BZA?
Just asking the applicant if he would like to speak.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Hello, I'm Dave Brink, 5027 County Road U, Liberty Center, Ohio. Speaking on behalf of Guitar Center, and thank you very much for hearing this case. Guitar Center is really excited about moving down the road into this plaza. The landlord has done a fantastic job of dressing up this plaza. There's a brand-new storefront, and Guitar Center is, as you know, even without COVID, the environment to do business in a brick and mortar store is very tough against internet and mail order. So the visibility and the presence is more important than ever. So Guitar Center feels that this is a very appropriate sign. It's smaller than they would do if the ordinance, if they were allowed more, but this is adequate. They have a very long visibility and feel that this is a very appropriate and modest sign to go on this storefront. So and the taglines that go along with it that say lessons, et cetera. That's just such an important part of their business. They don't just sell guitars, so the other verbiage is important as well.
And is the store going to be larger or smaller than what you currently have?
You know, I don't know the answer to that, I'm sorry. It's a 100-foot storefront. They have a standalone building currently,
Correct.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Thank you again. Council has heard from the applicant. Considering the size of the facade, the 100-foot sign would be small, not in keeping with other signs in the center. The poor visibility from the entrance. The board did refer to a recent sign, Bob's Furniture. It was a unanimous recommendation to approve, and all members were present. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam President.
Mr. DeJohn?
Mrs. Sabetta, it says here Mr. Kramer stated that the board did not grant a variance, or did grant a variance. Okay, I misread that, I'm sorry, for Bob's Discount Furniture. So they granted the same variance, is that correct? Is that what he was pointing out?
Yes. Almost, yes.
Yeah, it says Mr. Kramer stated that the
Size,
board
different
did
size.
grant a variance for signage. Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's move on. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. Belstria,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes?
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes. Resolution 2021-43 has been adopted. We'll move to Resolution 2021-44. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution 2021-44, a resolution determining to reject all bids received for the 2021 Sidewalk Improvement Program, authorizing the resolicitation of bids for said program, and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move.
Move, Finney.
Moved by Mr. DeJohn, seconded by Mrs. Finney. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. Belstria,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. DeJohn, seconded by Mr. Balestrea. The resolution requests that council reject all of the bids received for our 2021 sidewalk program as the bids exceeded the engineer's estimate for work to be completed. Mr. Gerson, did you want to add anything? We all? Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Gerson? Mr. Murphy, do you have anything?
No, I would just add, though, that by state law, since the bids, all bids exceeded the 10% over the estimate, then the council is required by law to reject all bids. So this takes care of rejecting the bids and authorizing the resolicitation of bids.
And how long will that resolicitation take?
Dan Gerson, City Engineer, Mayfield Heights. The bids are due June 2nd, I believe, at 11 o'clock, I believe. I believe it went June 2nd because of the holiday, but I'll double check. It's either June 1st or June 2nd. So we sent it out to all the bidders that actually picked up the plans last time, modified the quantities so we can get it down under the $200,000 threshold that we're trying to get to. So we expect new bids.
Thank you so much. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. Belstria.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes?
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes. Resolution 2021-44 has been adopted. We'll move to Resolution 2021-45. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution 2021-45, a resolution awarding a contract to Chagrin Valley Paving, LLC, for the 2021 road program in accordance with the bid specifications and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move.
Move, Finney.
Moved by Mr. DeJohn, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mr. Belstria.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. DeJohn, seconded by Mr. Belestrea. This resolution is awarding a contract for the city's 2021 road program to Chagrin Valley Paving in the amount of $1,642,572.60. Mr. Gerson.
Yes, just a clarification, we did receive 8 bids for this contract, or for this road program, so we did receive some aggressive bids. Chagrin Valley's lowest and best in our opinion. And then just a minor clarification, the company is Chagrin Valley Paving Incorporated, not LLC on the resolution. Make that quick change. That's all. I'll answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Gerson? Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Finney.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Belstria.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes, Resolution 2021-45 has been adopted. We will move on to Resolution 2021-46, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution 2021-46, a resolution determining the premises known as 1531 Longwood Drive, Mayfield Heights, Ohio, Cuyahoga County, permanent parcel number 861-24-035, to be a public nuisance, authorizing the mayor to issue a purchase order for the demolition of the single-family dwelling and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move, Finney.
Moved by Mrs. Finney, seconded by Mr. DeJohn. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Belstria.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Finney.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes. Do I have a motion to approve?
Second.
Moved by Mr. DeJohn, seconded by Mr. Balestrea. The resolution by approval authorizes the mayor to issue a purchase order for this residence to be demolished at 1531 Longwood. It is a public nuisance. Mr. Murphy, do you have anything to add?
Just for sake of clarification, this is the property which was the site of double murder maybe 3 years ago. And then the perpetrator, the alleged perpetrator, since he hasn't been tried yet, set the place on fire to cover his crime. So the residence is badly wrecked by fire, and the building department has determined that it must come down. The owner obviously has passed away, and there are 3 lawsuits involving this house that we have to work our way through. There's a criminal one where the individual will go on trial in, I think, February of 2022. Then there's a probate of the estate of the owner of the property. And then there is also a foreclosure action that was filed by the mortgage company, since the owner hasn't been paying the mortgage. So once we work through all of that, and hopefully it'll come very quickly, then we will be able to demolish the house. And we've been paid, the city has about $12,000 in escrow to pay for the demolition of the house. So hopefully that'll take care of it. But we would like to tear it down.
And we're going to send it to the land bank for the,
That's always an option. I usually put that in the legislation just in case the land bank would be interested in it. But at this point, I don't think that will happen. But it does provide in there at our option, if the land bank will take it, we could do it. But I doubt that very much.
any other discussion, questions? Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Finney.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Belstria.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes. Resolution 2021-46 has been adopted. We will now move on to ordinances. We'll begin with Ordinance 2021-18. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2021-18, an ordinance authorizing the mayor of the city of Mayfield Heights to enter into a collective bargaining agreement with the International Association of Firefighters Local 1500 and declaring an emergency. Third reading.
I need a motion to adopt ordinance 2021-18.
Move, Finney.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Finney, seconded by Mr. Balestrea. Discussion? Oh, a roll call on the motion to adopt, sorry.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Oh, we can have-
Yes.
I'm sorry, Shanice, I apologize.
Discussion first?
Yes, we can have discussion first. Mr. Mano?
I just want to ask the mayor, Mr. Esposito isn't here, correct? Okay. Is there any other monies involved in this other than the 2.5% raise? In other words, it's 2.5, 2.5, 2.5. Are there any other monies involved in this?
Your microphone.
It's not 2.5, 2.5, 2.5. It amounts to 2.5 the first year. Let Mrs. Fagan explain the whole contract.
There is an increase for 2021. Okay, I want to make sure I have my years right here. 2021 of 2.5%. In 2022, there's a reduction in their hours that is required, so there isn't a wage increase that year. And in the third year, there's an additional 2.5%, as Mr. Esposito explained when he was here. There is also obviously the bonus payment for, and Mr. Esposito talked about that also, for working through the COVID process. And we will be using a portion of our ARPA funds for that.
Speak to in the microphone, please.
I thought the bonus thing was an option if there wasn't a 2.5% offer.
That is not how, no, that is not how he explained it to us, and that's not how it is written.
Is there anybody other than Mr. Esposito that we can talk to about this? Is that possible?
What are your questions? Yeah, I mean,
Well, I don't think he's clarified the situation. I mean, obviously, I can't go into a lot of stuff because it was discussed in executive session. But what he came up with and what we talked about isn't the same. And I just wonder, where he's coming from with all this. I think there's some kind of a misconnect in the information, and I don't, and it's not the first time he's done that, and I just wonder if there's somebody else that we can possibly talk to go over this with and get some clarification.
not this evening. There's nobody else but Mrs. Fagan and myself.
I did call Mr. Esposito. I texted him on Friday just to get some clarification because again, it's executive session, so we can't speak about it here openly. But I believe what was discussed initially versus what he's brought forward, there is some disconnect. But I did text him on Friday and said the same. He never responded, and I called his office this morning at 8:15 a.m., spoke to someone who told me he was working remote, and I said, we have council meeting tonight, and I really want to hear from him prior to council meeting so that I can have my question answered at that point, which would have been any time in the last 10 hours, and he's never had the common courtesy to call back, which is disheartening if he's representing the city. But I thought there was a disconnect from what we had originally discussed and what.
What was the original?
Can we say that out here?
I mean,
No, we
Well,
can't.
it depends on the answer to that question, and is it something that, I think you can say, what.
Well, we
you would
initially
determine.
when he first came, not the last time when he stood at the podium, but he came into executive session, we talked about a lump sum instead of a percentage each year. And then he came back to talk with all of us and said there was a percentage. We didn't know that there was going to be a lump sum and a percentage.
There is a reduction in hours. in this-
Correct. I got that part.
Which adds up to the 2.5. Approximately, it's about 2.5%.
right.
So that's how you get the 2.5, 2.5, 2.5.
Okay. Yeah,
Per se.
understand that.
So,
But
we always talked about the bonus.
We never talked about the bonus.
You
We
mentioned
talked
that
about
from day
it one
because
versus the other one. We didn't have that money
There were,
to
though.
discuss it initially.
Mr. Murphy's
Okay, now you're
Murphy's
getting
getting nervous.
into nuts and bolts.
If I can,
Yeah,
I
I
can
don't
very generally try to answer that. I
Go
think
for
that-
it.
Okay, I think originally the percentage was, a bonus was discussed in lieu of other options.
Correct.
And then we ended up in fact-finding, and we knew what the fact finder had awarded. And then that was the point that Mr. Esposito came back and spoke to council again. And I apologize if he did not get a hold of you. I can't answer for that.
Right.
Certainly, if that happens, reach out to one of us, and we will also try to get a hold of him. Not that he would respond to us before you, but maybe both of us on him would get a response a little bit quicker. But when he did come back, I believe he explained all of that with the percentages, the middle year not having a true increase because of the reduction in hours.
Understood
And
that.
that bonus would still be there, because I know we talked at that point in time that the ARPA funds would be available for that purpose.
But at that time, I believe, Mrs. Fagan, you didn't know what those funds were going to be for. You said, I have to check into it. It has not been defined as exactly what those funds could be used for. So basically, that is, there's part of the disconnect. In that meeting, you said, I don't know. This was before, when this was all in discussion, before you went on vacation. You said, at this point, I don't know for sure, because I believe someone asked the question if we could use it for a road. And your comment was, I don't know.
Right.
So how did it come about?
I'd be happy to respond to that one also, if I may.
Thank
The four very general points that they said from the very beginning that ARPA funds could be used for, one of them was bonuses to those essential employees as, for working through the COVID process. The reason I said I was not sure on the road portion of it, because the fourth point that they have on there is that you can use it for water, sewer, and broadband. And past that, they did not define what infrastructure meant. Normally, to someone in my world, roads are infrastructure, but because the roads were not specifically delineated, that's the part of it that I wanted to wait for additional guidance on. Still not exactly sure about the roads. I have not read through all of their guidance yet, but definitely the wage portion is an applicable and appropriate use of funding.
Madam Chair, if I could.
Mayor?
This has not changed, these two, both of them, the police and the fire agreements have not changed since the day we had the first reading on them. So
Correct.
I'm not, I'm,
2.5, 2.5, 2.5.
yeah,
Got it.
they haven't changed since the first time we read these ordinances.
Correct.
So I'm not sure where the disconnect is, and if there was a disconnect there, why we have to wait till the third reading in the 11th hour without, us being able to have Mr. Esposito here to answer these questions? I think it would have been helpful from day one, when we introduced these, if there was a disconnect, if council felt there needed to be more of an explanation, we would have had plenty of time to answer those questions.
I'll be perfectly honest with you. Someone working in City Hall called and told me that everyone was getting a $4,000 bonus. And I was like, no, that's not what's happening on May 24th. I know that the firefighters and the police department are going to get an increase in, through the contract, blah, blah, blah. Did not know, and again, at the last, so at the last meeting, Mrs. Fagan had said, I do not know how those funds are going to be used. So,
We knew they could be used for
That was not stated in the last meeting that you
We
knew.
knew they could be used for that. There was a question on what infrastructure it could be used for. And the other agreements have not been settled yet. So we're
Correct.
just dealing with these two.
And
And
these,
if somebody asks you and makes a statement like that, I would hope you'd reach out or reach out and say, hey, what's going on here? There is a disconnect. Somebody just told me from City Hall that,
exactly
we're
the
getting
reason
this-
I
you're
called
getting that
Mr.
information.
Esposito twice.
Why don't you call me?
Well, because Mr. Esposito is the one who could clear it up. He's the one who made the comment. That's the only reason, is that he's the one who stood at the podium and said 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, reduced hours in the fire department, blah, blah, blah. Everyone, I believe, I'm not speaking for everyone, but I understood what he said. It was
Madam
not,
Chairman.
it was not clear about both. Yes, Mrs. Finney.
I just wanted to comment that I feel like we're bickering over our police and fire, and I've had nothing but great responses from residents for both. They worked during the worst year of probably our lives during this COVID, and we're arguing over a raise for these people that work so hard.
No, I don't believe we're arguing over a raise because they did work hard. They're first responders. They deserve everything they get because of what they do, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. No one's arguing over a raise. What we're saying is that what is entailed over and above the raise was not clearly communicated by Mr. Esposito. That's all I'm saying. I don't know what everyone else is saying, but that's what I'm saying. Mr. DeJohn.
Yeah, I was able to get a hold of Mr. Esposito last week, and I was also surprised to find out about this lump sum payment, which, and this is just my own opinion, I thought he was kind of surprised that I knew about it, but of course it got communicated to me. You know, I'm for everyone to get a raise, especially the police and
Right.
fire. Here's my problem. Once these two entities get their raise, then everyone else in the city gets it. Everyone else, including administrative staff. So they're all gonna get that lump sum payment as far as the raise too. So, thank you, that's all.
Mr. Mano.
Mr. DeJohn said everyone in the city gets the raise. Council doesn't get it, though.
No,
Okay.
no.
But we have to sign off on it for everybody else. And we worked through the COVID too, not in the same fashion, but the fact is, if you're saying everybody in City Hall was getting a raise or a bonus, what about council? Are we stepchildren, or what's the deal here?
Mrs. Fagan, did you want to say something?
I can, Mr. Mano. The raises for the mayor and for all of council are set by ordinance. There is, which is what we are doing now, and we will introduce that ordinance for council and for the mayor for this year. There's a very detailed calculation process for that was set up by prior council, and it's based on an increase in the general fund. It is based on the CPI index for the prior year. It is very convoluted, and that calculation has been done, and that will be presented to council at the same time that the non-union ordinance is presented to council also. And that ordinance for council has been presented to council for every single year since I've been here for their approval.
Roll call on the motion to,
Mrs. Tracy?
oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Ballestrea, I
Yeah,
apologize.
I just wanted to say, I did have more of an understanding, I don't know where the misconception lies, but I definitely had my notes and understanding that this bonus, this COVID bonus, was, because I specifically asked the question with the ARPA funds, if it could use for this purpose to offset any monies coming from the general fund. And I had them in my notes that Mrs. Fagan said most likely. So that's been verified, and that was always on the table, that was going to be done, as far as I was concerned. So from my point of view, it was discussed, and I thought it was going to be a done deal, especially if those funds were going to be utilized from the federal government.
Mr. Mano.
When you talk with Mr. Esposito, you're chasing your tail round and round and round because, first of all, he never completes a thought or a point. He always morphs into something else as he's going along. And he uses a lot of terminology that a lot of people just don't understand, because it's like he's on the inside and you're on the outside, and he's not taking the time to really explain it to you. It's like, well, you should know this. But I don't have that much faith in Mr. Esposito, I'll be honest with you, and I would really, I'd really like to find somebody else to represent the city.
Man, just one last comment.
One last comment.
I just want the residents to know at home that it's our administrative staff, Mr. Esposito, that negotiate these contracts, and they basically come to council and say, hey, this is the best we can do, and tell us to vote on it. So we really don't have any input into these contracts, something that I think that one of us, and I've always said this since I became a council representative, that one of us sit on that committee to listen to these negotiations, and I've been shot down about that in the past. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, do you have something to say?
Yeah, it's just called separation of power, Bob.
Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
No.
Mr. Belstria,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn,
No.
Mrs. Teresi.
No. Ordinance 2021-18 has failed,
Been defeated.
been defeated. We'll move to ordinance 2021-19.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance 2021-19, an ordinance authorizing the mayor of the city of Mayfield Heights to enter into a collective bargaining agreement with the Ohio Patrolmen's Benevolent Association, patrol officers, and declaring an emergency. Third reading.
I need a motion to adopt ordinance 2021-19.
Move, Finney.
Moved by Mrs. Finney,
Move.
seconded by Mr. Balestrea. Discussion? Roll call on the motion to adopt.
Mr. Mano, Mr. Belstria,
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn,
No.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
No. Ordinance 2021-19 has been defeated. We'll move to ordinance 2021-20.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ordinance 2021-20, an ordinance continuing a moratorium on the operation of any bed and breakfast establishment in the city and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move.
Second.
Moved by Mr. DeJohn, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mr. Belstria,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestrea, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. The ordinance will continue to maintain the moratorium that has been placed on bed and breakfasts or Airbnbs in the city. Discussion?
The only point I would make is that I've talked with President Snyder about her assigning this to committee so that council can discuss exactly what, if any, restrictions, limitations, whatever, to put on bed and breakfast establishments in the city.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Chairman,
Mrs. Finney?
is this something we want to discuss at the legislative meeting?
Do you want this discussed in the legislative meeting, Mr. Mayor?
It could be, sure. I'm not sure Mrs. Snyder's assigned it yet, but, I'll talk to her about that.
It seems a good a place as any as legislation on.
I would agree.
Thanks, Mrs. Finney. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mr. Belstria,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes. Ordinance 2021-20 has been adopted. We'll move on to ordinance 2021-21. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance 2021-21, an ordinance determining the reschedule of first regular meeting of council in June 2021 from Monday, June 14, 2021 to Wednesday, June 16, 2021, and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move.
Move, Finney.
Moved by Mr. DeJohn, seconded by Mrs. Finney. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Belstria,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. DeJohn,
Second.
second by Mr. Balestrea. Typically, our meetings are held on the second and fourth Monday of each month. It was requested due to council members' unavailability. Our regularly scheduled meeting of Monday, June 14th, is asked to be moved to Wednesday, June 16th. Discussion. Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you. Does anyone know the reason for the rescheduling? Why this is an emergency?
I don't know the reason. I was just asked if I would be, could be available on the 16th instead of the 14th. I thought possibly, not knowing from anyone else, I didn't know if someone was not available on the 14th. Mr. Murphy?
Just to speak, not to the moving of the meeting, but the emergency. The emergency is that this legislation, if adopted, has to go into effect immediately. So that's why ordinarily it's 30 days before something goes into effect. That's what the emergency is, so that it goes into effect immediately. It's not an emergency to move the meeting. The emergency language refers to the effective date of the legislation.
Because we have less than 30 days between now and
Correct.
June 14th.
Yeah. It's not moving the meeting because of any emergency.
Well, why?
Madam Chairman.
Wait, Mrs. Sabetta is speaking. Go ahead, Mrs.
I'm sorry.
Sabetta. That's okay.
I'm just wondering, would this set a precedent due to the fact that because someone's not here, we change the meeting? I mean, is this something we do in an ordinance? Would this set a precedent? That anyone can change the meeting?
There's language in Section 2
Yeah.
indicating that this will not serve to amend any provision of either the charter or the codified ordinances. So unless there is another ordinance adopted in the future, you will still have the regular meetings on the first and third Monday of the month.
First and, second and fourth.
Second and fourth.
You're in the
Wrong city.
You're in the wrong city. I believe we've done
I
this once
apologize.
before in December, where we had, because of a special meeting. I don't think we did either. I think we just,
We did originally, and then I believe we amended the codified ordinances so that we wouldn't have to do it by ordinance. You could just do it at the prior meeting. But whenever the codified ordinance provide that you shall have meetings the second and fourth Monday of the month. So my opinion is if you were going to change that, you need to do it by ordinance unless there's an emergency where you don't have enough time to do it by vote of council.
Mr. DeJohn.
So we still don't have the answer to the question, who requested this meeting to be changed, and why was it requested to be changed? And what Mrs. Sabetta, let me rephrase what she's saying. She's saying, if we go ahead and do this, is it a precedence among all of us that we'll try this tactic again later on to push meetings off? So that's what I think she was asking.
I understand what she was asking. I wish I had an answer.
So
I
none of
don't.
us know why we're
I was-
asking for this meeting to be moved?
I do not.
Well, then,
What I read exactly is how
Support
I
it then.
felt. I felt that someone must have been unavailable. You know, there must have been some reason to change it.
So legislation was introduced, sponsored by Mrs. Snyder.
Sponsored by Mrs.
That's
Snyder.
where the legislation came
So-
from.
That's all. So
The sponsor.
she's the sponsor. She may have requested it, if she sponsored it.
Nobody knows why.
Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. Belstria,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes. Ordinance 2021-21 has been adopted. Moving on to motions, we will begin with motion A. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Motion to approve the final site plan for a 10,600 square foot addition for Hillcrest Hospital at 6780 Mayfield Road.
Do I have a motion to approve?
Move, Finney.
Moved by Mr. DeJohn, seconded by Mrs. Finney. Discussion. A drawing of Hillcrest Hospital expansion was in your package this week. This is their final site plan. Mr. Belestrea.
Just one difference between the preliminary and the final was just a difference in some of the landscaping in the rear of the property. There was no change in the building or any of the plans that was presented to the council previously, just some changes in landscaping, that's all. And planning approved it.
Thank you, Mr. Belestrea. Do you know when they're going to begin this
I do not
construction?
have the exact date, but I would assume sooner than later.
Thank you. Did you want to say something, Mayor? Oh. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. Belstria,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes, this motion has been approved. Mr. Murphy, we'll move on to motion B.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Motion to approve the final site plan for a new 8,431 square foot building for the Cogan Dental Building at 30055 Cedar Road, contingent upon the fire department approval letter.
Do I have a motion to approve?
Move?
Move, Finney.
Moved by Mr. Balestreas, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. We all had a letter from the fire department with their approval for this dental building. Mr. Balestreas, did you want to add anything else?
That was basically the contingency at the planning commission. We just had word of mouth that it was approved, but we didn't have anything in writing. So I was chairing the meeting and we put the contingency on it, just so make sure that council had this in front of us this evening, that the fire department approved the plan, because the fire trucks cannot circumvent the entire perimeter, or circumference, I should say, of the building. So they wanted some hydrants moved and such, and now it's met with their approval. That's the difference between preliminary and final.
Thank you. Anything else? Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. Belstria.
Yes?
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes, this motion has been approved. Next, we'll move on to new business or comments from council. Are there any comments this evening from council?
Madam Chairman,
Mrs. Finney?
I was trying to ask earlier, do we still have the same two dates in July and August for meetings set?
No dates.
No,
That July and August is recessed.
Thought it was supposed to be the second.
Well, we had meetings set, Mr. DeJohn, and made it that it was a set date. Is that still in effect?
we pull that up in a second.
Wait, we're all kind of grasping at straws here.
Hold
Mrs.
on.
Finney, hold on a moment.
Um,
It was if the meeting was necessary, we would have two set dates.
Okay, codified ordinances provide during the months of July and August, council shall be on summer schedule and shall meet on either the second or fourth Monday of the month, provided there is an agenda. There is no, except in, it also provides twice a month, except that in December, only one regular meeting shall be required, which shall be on the second Monday. So there's one meeting in the month of
December.
second Monday.
And if we have to have a meeting in July or August, it would be on the second Monday or the fourth Monday? Normal council meeting
Yes.
date,
Yeah, either the second or the fourth, provided there's an agenda.
correct. Does that answer your question, Mrs. Finney?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. I just got a text on my phone from someone watching our council meeting, and the meeting being shown on TV is May 9th. Oops. Live, but it's the May 9th meeting? Oh, then it's not live. Oh, I didn't know if it was, I only know it's May 9th. Anything else from council? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move.
Moved by Mr. DeJohn, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you. This meeting is now adjourned.
Has left the